Hey everybody, welcome back to the homestead. Well, the seasons are changing and we're transitioning from the things that we typically do in the summer to getting ready for winter and most importantly right now, fall. One of the big projects that we have to do every fall is get the greenhouses ready once again for growing over the winter.
So today we have hopefully a big work day to get quite a few things done with this greenhouse here. This is a greenhouse that we have a large raised bed garden inside of. We're going to be growing a lot of our greens, some other things in there over the winter. So it's time for us to get it ready for that, like Kevin said. A few things we need to accomplish today for sure. We have a shade cloth over the top of this raised bed garden so that during the summer it just doesn't get so hot in there. We put that on in the early spring so that what was still left in there wasn't getting so hot. But now it's starting to cool off. We need to take that off so the plants we plant in there will have as much sun as possible.
During the springtime, we also did quite a bit of growing in the big Crystalix tubs. Most of those plants are done, but we haven't pulled them out yet, so today we're going to pull those out so we can move some of those tubs back into the greenhouse and use them over the winter. So we're going to start with the shade cloth, and we got a lot of work to accomplish. This side of the greenhouse doesn't look too bad here behind us. We actually already did some work over here the other day, pulled a bunch of weeds. We actually put down a wider piece of the woven weed fabric to keep the weeds down a little bit better. But the other side of the greenhouse, where we're going to show you guys in a minute, it's a disaster.
It's kind of a mess.
So we've got a lot of work to do over there today. We're going to bring you guys along as we work, get this ready, and if things go well, we might even get as far as getting a little bit planted today. So let's get started. We got a lot of work to do.
While Kevin starts taking off the shade cloth, I just want to talk with you a little bit about it. This shade cloth is a 60% shade cloth. It doesn't block out all of the sun, still lets some in, but keeps a lot of that heat out. We have actually been using these for about 7 years, like these exact ones. We bought them when we were still living in the desert of the Phoenix, Arizona area, and used these to help extend the cool weather of the desert there. So even though we've had these for 7 years and they're holding up, they're about to the end of their life here. We may have to replace them in the next couple years, but they're just easily screwed on to the hip boards here. We're going to remove those and just undo these wind straps, and will allow us to just slip that off really easily.
So this is the side of the greenhouse I was telling you guys about that has become kind of a nightmare with weeds growing up. Now, you might be wondering why, if we have the weed fabric down, we have so many weeds growing over here. And to be honest, it's our own fault. In the spring, when we set this area up, we rolled out the weed fabric, but we were just about out of staples to put the weed fabric down. So we barely put any in here at all. Which is why the weeds are growing up, because they're just growing up kind of through the seams and other places. So after we get this done today, we're going to go through and put more staples in. Now we have more, and so hopefully in the future this won't happen again. But so this is kind of our own fault. We just need to clean it up, and we'll be ready to get this area back in shape.
this area looks much better. We spent a lot of sweat and muscle getting all of the weeds out. We had to move all of these buckets out of the way to do a good job. We moved them all back in. I've also taken out all of the plants from these buckets that just were done for the summer. We don't need them over the winter. Although I do have some perennial herbs that are going to stay in here and will be just fine outside over the winter. So let me show you the few things that are left out here that will be okay for the winter. Like I said, a lot of my herbs that are perennials are going to be sticking around, like this one. This is stinging nettle. We have to be pretty careful with this one because it can actually poke you and kind of cause a rash, but it's very medicinal. It's actually an antihistamine and can be used to treat seasonal allergies. That's why I'm growing it, so we can see if that'll help our family with seasonal allergies. We have some multiplying onions that we planted. These are from our friend Hillbilly in Arkansas. They're doing really well. I'm excited that they pulled through the drought of this summer. Have some parsley that's looking pretty sad, but it's a biennial, so it'll come back next year and produce seeds for us. Ashwagandha is looking pretty sad also, but it's the roots that I'm after, which is why I haven't pulled them. Ashwagandha is very medicinal. It helps lift your mood, so I'm going to be digging that up pretty soon. Some basil yet that I'm not ready to say goodbye to. And these chard, they need some TLC from me. I'm just going to cut back the leaves that are looking pretty sad. And these are actually going to follow us into the greenhouse after we plant because these will grow really well over the winter. Lots of decisions to make about these empty buckets. We'll be planting in some of them, but some of them might have to wait for the spring. We had a ton of plants in these buckets this summer, but it's done with them. They're all done, so I pulled them all out. And over here, mostly perennial herbs. I have some lavender, rosemary, thyme, some St. John's wort, and holy basil. I have some feverfew and some bee balm. These are going to be transplanted into permanent locations next spring. I was just growing them out in here so they could get their root systems developed before I transferred them. And actually, I didn't have my herb garden set up, so they're just kind of waiting in place here until I have that set up. Marshmallow, anise hyssop, and kind of a surprise for us. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a terrible time growing zucchini in the big garden because the squash bugs have just annihilated them, the squash bugs and the cucumber beetles. So we actually just gave up on them. But someone had mentioned that we should try growing them, to start them in the summer and grow them over the fall. And so we have 2 buckets of zucchini that about a week ago looked fantastic, and they're actually producing zucchini. They're looking a little sad now because they actually have gotten some powdery mildew, but we're going to take care of that with some neem oil, and they are producing zucchini, so we're really excited to have these guys. Now, these will not make it past the first frost, which could be in a couple weeks, but we're hoping that they'll make it through and give us some more zucchini before that time comes. Pretty much everything else except for the chard that I talked about can stay out here over the winter and not have to be moved into the greenhouse for protection. But there will be things that we'll plant in these over the winter to supply food for our family.
So we're inside the greenhouse. Now this greenhouse we put up last winter. This greenhouse is 16 feet wide by 32 feet long. And in here we have a raised bed that is 6 feet wide by 22 feet long. We'll also be bringing some of those buckets in over the winter, but it's still up in the air as to exactly how many. Mostly we'll be growing this winter in this big raised bed. We'll be growing a lot of lettuces and greens, some turnips, probably some beets, just a lot of cold weather plants that can make it through the entire winter without any supplemental heat, which there are actually quite a few that can make it through our Missouri winters without extra heat. Now this greenhouse has worked really well for us for growing in the cold months. If you're interested in a greenhouse like this, We actually got this greenhouse from growersolution.com, a great company. We've actually purchased both of our greenhouses from them, along with a lot of other things from the farm. Like I said, this greenhouse is 16 by 32. It has these roll-up sides that add extra ventilation on it, and it's just a really easy greenhouse kit to assemble. Sarah and I put this up, just the two of us, last winter. Took us about a week to put it up, and that was working just, a few hours a day to get this all assembled. So really an easy kit.
Well, we've decided to give the raised bed a good watering this evening. Take a look at the seeds we have in the house tonight, pick out what we're going to plant, and then we're going to plant in the morning. So we will be sure to bring you along, show you what we're going to plant, and then we'll get started first thing in the morning. Well, good morning, you guys. It's the next day. We're done with animal chores, and so now it is time to get busy planting this raised bed in our greenhouse.
The first thing that we want to do is go over all the different varieties of plants that we're going to be planting. Our goal is to get this entire raised bed planted today. We've got a lot of different things that we're going to be planting, but half of the raised bed is going to be lettuce. The reason that we want to get this entire raised bed planted today is because winter growing is a little bit different than summer growing. You run into a problem with winter growing in that the daylight, the amount of daylight every day is getting shorter and shorter. Once you hit the mark where you only have 10 hours of daylight a day, or less, the plants in the greenhouse or outside during the winter time will actually go dormant. So they'll continue to grow as long as there's 10 or more hours of daylight a day, but once it gets less than 10 hours a day, those plants will stay alive, they just won't grow any bigger. So our goal is to get all of these plants in so they have the maximum amount of time to grow before we hit that time. Now in our area, that is November 21st is when we hit the 10 hours of daylight. So all of these plants have about 6 weeks to grow, and then they'll pretty much go dormant. Like I said, they'll stay alive. We can continue to harvest them. They just won't be vigorously growing at that point.
The 6 weeks that we have left is enough time to grow lettuce, radishes, spinach, and maybe some kohlrabi to the point that they are considered baby greens. So they're not going to be giant lettuce plants. They're going to be smaller, but still big enough for us to be harvesting throughout the fall and maybe into the winter. So like Kevin said, we are going to be planting almost half of this garden in lettuce. We were sent a bunch of different varieties of lettuce from a subscriber. I think it was last spring that we got that. And so we're going to be planting a bunch of these different varieties in this greenhouse. So I just want to go over with you the 10 varieties of lettuce that we're going to be planting in this greenhouse. Now, all of these lettuce seeds are from Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company, so if you are interested in growing some of them, make sure you check out their website or their catalog, which will be coming out soon. So the first variety we are going to be growing is called Forellenschluss. I'll show you what that looks like. We've actually grown that before, and it is beautiful, and it is very tasty. The second variety is Merlot.
Yeah, we planted some of that last spring, and it was great.
It was gorgeous, and it was so tasty. We're going to be planting oak leaf lettuce. We've had that before. That's actually in the mix of Rocky Top lettuce mix that we enjoy so much. Rogue de Hiver. Pardon my language barrier issues. Sanguine Amelior.
You didn't know how fancy we were, did you?
We're so fancy. And this is one of my favorites, this Paris Island Cos. This is a romaine variety that is wonderful. It grows very well. Oh, Butter Crunch. We're going to be doing Butter Crunch. We've done that before. Lunix, which is another like purple variety. Two more. Big Boston. It doesn't have a picture on the package. Big Boston. We've never done that before. And Bronze Beauty. Also doesn't have a picture. So those are the 10 varieties of lettuces that we will be planting in here. I'm so excited to get them going and for you all to see their progress over the next 6 weeks.
Then on the other end of the raised bed, we're going to be planting a variety of things. We're going to be planting some spinach. This is also from Baker Creek, called Spinach Gigante d'Inverno, which is supposed to be a pretty fast variety, 55 days. We're going to be planting 2 types of radishes. We planted both of these in the spring and really liked them a lot. The first is the French breakfast radish, and the second is the white icicle radish. Both of these are pretty quick varieties as well.
The nice thing about both of those types of varieties of radishes is they get long, so you feel like you get like more radish for your plant.
Yeah, they're almost like a carrot.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that we're going to be planting, and it may or may not make it to maturity within those 6 weeks, we'll see, is some kohlrabi. Now, I really love kohlrabi, and so I'm hoping that these will do well, but if not, well, we'll try again in the spring.
It's worth the risk because they're so amazing.
Right. So that's what we're going to be planting in this raised bed to grow over the winter. Now, we will have an opportunity to plant more things in the greenhouse later in the winter. So when we get to November 21st and there's no longer 10 hours of daylight, like I said, these will go dormant. But then sometime around February, I'll have to look up the exact date, but sometime around February, we start once again having 10 hours of daylight. That is when a second planting season will start for the winter. So we can actually plant our early spring things, like all of our brassicas, like cauliflower and cabbage and broccoli. All of those things can be planted in February in the greenhouse, and they'll start to grow and give us an early spring harvest. So we do have 2 growing seasons in the greenhouse, which is exciting, and gives us fresh things to eat all winter long.
So we have a lot of planting to do. We need to get started. Let us show you how we're going to get this all set up and how we're going to plant in this raised bed garden. When we plant our raised bed garden here, we're going to be using the seeding square as a guide to help us know where to plant the seeds. This seeding square is super handy. We used it last time we planted this garden and it worked really well. Originally, it was sent to us by one of our subscribers and we tried it out. We weren't sure if we were going to like it, but when we tried it out, it was super handy and we're going to use it again this time. Now this seeding square, you press down on your soil and it will make a mark to where you're going to be planting. But then also all of these holes, depending on the color, will help you plant evenly the seeds that you're going to be planting. Now there are lists out there online when you're using the square foot gardening method that will tell you how many plants per square foot you should put in each one of these square feet. And then you'll find the corresponding color and then use this as a guide for planting your seeds. I'm going to use this and show you how we do it. It comes with what's called a dibble that you use to poke down into the ground and put your seeds in there. It's marked with how many inches down you'll want to put your seeds. So this is helpful too when you press this down in the soil. You can mark all of your seeds where they're supposed to go, remove this, and then plant down in the holes. So I'll show you how this works and how we're going to be using it. So we're going to be starting here right at the end of the raised bed garden. We're going to be planting in rows this way, so every row will have a different variety of lettuce, at least on this part of the garden. So I'm going to start using my seeding square by lining it up on the edge here and pressing down. And you'll see, I hope you can see on the camera, that when I pick it up, there is somewhat of a mark here that has been left in the soil, because that will at least give me a guide when I'm moving where I need to go next. It doesn't need to be there permanently, it just needs to help me a little bit as I continue moving and planting. I'm going to be planting 4 lettuce plants per square foot. I'll be using the blue holes here. Now, because lettuce seeds are so small and they will basically germinate right on top of the soil, I don't need to use the dibble and poke a hole down in there and then drop the seeds. I can just drop the seeds right through these holes, pick this up, and when I water, the seeds will fall down into a nook or a cranny and they'll germinate there. If I were going to be planting some bigger seed, I could use the dibble, poke a hole down in there, however deep you need it to be. I could put the seed in there, lift it up, cover it up, and be done. So that's how you can use this seeding square to help you plant. Okay, so I have this down where I need it, and I'm just going to plant these first lettuce seeds. We're starting with Forellenschluss. Now I'm going to be writing this down on a paper, what I plant in each row, so that I know what came up, what didn't, what we like, what we didn't like, because I'm not going to remember the name of all of these lettuce varieties. Okay, so a couple seeds in here, and I'm just going to drop down, 2 or 3 seeds in each hole. Then I can pick this up, move it to the next spot, just press down a little bit so I know where I'm going. The third spot. Now this raised bed is 6 feet wide, which is almost too wide to easily harvest. But because we need to maximize the growing space in this greenhouse, we chose 6 feet wide, even though we'll have to bend and reach over to harvest. If you are in our situation and planning a raised bed like this, you may not want to go wider than 4 feet, but we're okay having to reach to harvest some of our food. So I'm going to plant this side, Kevin's going to plant that side, and we will have this thing planted in no time.
Well, we got the entire raised bed planted. Doesn't look very impressive right now because it's all just seeds, but hopefully within just a week or so, most of these things will be up and we'll be able to give you guys an overview of how everything is doing.
All it needs is a good watering, and then these seeds can start germinating. You guys were so happy that you spent some time with us yesterday and this morning. We hope you're enjoying our videos, and if you are, please make sure to hit the subscribe button below so that you are notified of all of our new videos that come out. And also, the best way that you can help us here on the homestead is to share our videos on all your social media. So if you'll do that, we would be so pleased. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.
God bless.